All right, so a couple of things I need to let you know about real quickly. First thing I want to tell you is if you're brand new here and today's your first day, really glad that you're here. We're going to kind of jump around a little bit in the Old Testament, and you're like, man, that's a lot of Old Testament today. And you're thinking, man, it's like Old Testament pop quiz here every Sunday. No, actually, it's not. So, but anyway, just kind of come along with us on that. But here's the other thing I want to tell you. If it's your first time here, I want to say, hey, come back. 2 or 3 more weeks at least. I'd say, hey, come give us a test drive for 5. Come along for 5 weeks, and you'll see, hey, you'll kind of get a feel for who we are and our mission and what God we believe has called us to do in our communities. And it's a great way to kind of come in and come and kick the tires and look under the hood and kind of see what's going on with us. Because, you may show up here and it's a really good day or it's a really bad day. And over 4 or 5 weeks, you kind of get a feel, oh, yeah, this is who we are. So I hope that you'll do it. I hope I get a chance to meet you. I'll be out in the cafe after the service, and I would love the opportunity to meet you. And the other thing I want to tell you about is Easter is just a few weeks away. Easter is April 12th. This year it's on a Sunday. Excuse me. And but here's what we're going to do. On Easter, we're going to have our Easter offering is going to reach more, because what happens when we give financially, it enables missionaries and our local mission partners to be able to reach more people for Jesus. And so here's the idea. On Easter Sunday, we want to bring a special offering that day for people who are unreached, who are far from God in our communities, helping our local mission partners and people around the world. And so instead of doing our missions offering at Christmas, we're going to do it at Easter. And so here's this opportunity for us to do something incredible. There are over 5,000 people, I checked this morning, that call Southcrest home. So if each of us gave $30, that's $1 a day between now and Easter. Just $1 a day. Okay, that would be $150,000 that we would be giving towards missions, which would be remarkable. And I know you're sitting there going, well, everybody ain't going to do it. I know. And some people will give more, and some people say, oh, I can't give that much, I can give less, because it's just $1 a day, right? But look, what if a third of us did it? We'd give $50,000 towards missions. That would be remarkable. We can do that. So I want you to pray, and I want you to see what God would have you do and what God would have you give on that day, because we're going to do it all on one day on Easter. So it's going to be a big deal, all right? So if you got a Bible with you, you can turn there. I'm in Ruth chapter 1. If you don't have a Bible with you, you can follow along on the magic television that keeps popping up these words that are right from Scripture. And here's the deal. Ruth is one of 2 books in the Bible that's named after a woman. A lot of times people look at God and say, he devalues women. He doesn't value them. But actually, over and over again, you see that God values women and lifts them up. And this is a story that has got despair and hope and joy and sorrow. And there's a love story involved in it. And guys, let me tell you something. If you're thinking about, hey, you know what? I'd really like my wife to kind of really be encouraged about something, but I don't know how to do that, so I'm going to go take her to see a chick flick. Save your money, because this is better than any chick flick that you're ever going to see. It's a really good little, hey, and I know you probably don't read a lot of Hebrew. I don't either. But the language here that's used is really powerful. There's a lot of little things that you see as you read through the language here. Another thing I want to tell you about is that it's at a time in history where King Saul hadn't shown up on the scene yet. Now, if you remember, there's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. Deuteronomy? Did I just say that? I think I just said that. That was not glossolalia. I'm stuttering. Okay? So anyway, here's the deal, is that, Genesis is, that's about how everything's got created, and there's Noah and the flood, and there's Joseph in Egypt, and there's Isaac, and there's all kinds of things that go on in Genesis, Exodus, the delivery from the children of Israel from Egypt, and then the journey out in the desert, and then how God's people are going to live. The end of Deuteronomy, they're going to go into the promised land. And then there's Joshua, and Joshua's a lot of battles on how they conquer the promised land. And then they get settled in there, and there's the book of Judges, and they're trying to figure out, hey, how are we going to live? And so you see that there's this pattern that happens in the book of Judges where God's people disobey, and that he comes and he says, listen, straighten that stuff out. And they go, yeah, you're right, we're going to straighten that stuff out. And then they disobey. And so Ruth takes place somewhere in that time frame, somewhere around, we think, between Judges 10, Judges 12. That's what happens in that time frame. So for those of you who like lots of little Bible knowledge, there you go. All right. So Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 says, in the days when the judges ruled, remember that's what I just was talking about, there's no king yet. Before King Saul, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. Now, if you back up one page in your Bible to Judges chapter 21, you'll see this is why I wanted us to do the book of Ruth together. And it says this. It says, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Does that sound familiar to you? Like the kind of time frame we're living in right now? Everybody does what's right in their own eyes? Look, listen, I know you think that's right for you. That just doesn't work for me. Right? Somebody comes up to you and says, and they try and tell you how to lose weight because their way is the right way. They try and tell you how to drive. They try and tell you how to talk to people. And they say, if you don't go along with them, well, you're just intolerant. And the thing is there's no king because the vast majority of people do not want to submit their lives to God. So there's no king, and everybody is doing what's right in their own eyes. And so that's why I think it's a good time for us to look at the book of Ruth. So backing up, let's go to verse 1 again. So in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So not a drought, not a bad year for crops. I mean, it had gone on for some time. There's no food. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. Now, here's what's so interesting about this, right? In the first 5 verses of Ruth, there's so much that's packed in here. So I'm going to kind of pick it up and put it down. So here we go. So the word Bethlehem, the word Beth in Hebrew is house. Lahem is of bread. So Bethlehem means house of bread. House of bread. And so when David later on sets up the kingdom of Israel to be in Bethlehem, it's because it's the best, most fertile place in all of Israel. And so it makes no sense that there would be a famine in the house of bread. And so there's this man, and he decides that he's going to go to Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. Now, here's the deal about Moab. Moab had always been the enemy of God. They hated the children of Israel. And there was this animosity that between the 2 of them. And the children of Israel, they didn't really love them either. They just did not like each other. I mean, and the whole thing is that the Moabites started when Lot, and you remember him from Genesis, or if not, you can go look him up later on. There's a guy named Lot. And so he has an incestuous relationship with his daughter. And when he has this incestuous relationship with his daughter, that's how the Moabites get started. Now, later on, because God says, look, the Moabites, these people are trouble. You need to stay away from them. He says, because they will get you to follow their gods, and you should stay away from them because you guys are not disciplined enough to stay away from other gods, so you should stay away from the Moabites. And so, but the men of Israel said, God, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. And so what happened is at one point is that God kills 24,000 Israelite men because they didn't listen to him. Because here's the thing about the Moabites. The Moabite women, for the Israelite men, in the words of that famous theologian, Sheryl Crow, you were my favorite mistake. They had they liked the way the Moabite women walked. And so it's kind of like the Moabite woman was not somebody you want to introduce to mama, but daddy liked to see her walk through the door. And so, God said, you need to stay away from them. Don't sleep with the Moabite women because they're going to cause you to worship their God. And the Israelite men go, nah, we can handle it. Turned out they couldn't. And then they just couldn't get away from him. Kind of like, ladies, you got that boyfriend that you should get away from, and he's trouble. And, but you can't quite get away from him. And every now and then, he gets that, you break off that midnight drunk call to him. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wish you, that guy. Did you ever have that guy? Put your hand up. You're in church. Be honest. Oh, God. Right? But that's what I'm talking about. You know, that person that uses, so that was their reputation. And so there's this guy, he and his wife and his two sons. Now, the name of the man was Elimelech. And the name of his wife was Naomi. And the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Klingons. Not really. Okay, so they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. And so they went into the country of Moab and remained there. Because the idea was we're going to go there and visit, but then go, no, tell you what, we're just going to settle here, right? And here's the thing, in the Bible, it's really important what someone's name is. And so sometimes we name our children something that we think it sounds good, but you ought to probably give some consideration to what you name your child and what it means, right? So Elimelech means, my God is king. And so it's kind of interesting because someone whose name is, my God is king, says, God, I don't care what you say. You say, don't go around the Moabites, don't be there, but I don't trust in your physical provision to take care of me and my family, so I'm going to pick my family up. We're going to move somewhere else because I can take care of them better than you can, because, God, you don't know what you're doing. Even though his name is, my God is king. So he says, actually, God, you are not my king, and so I'm going to go live life the way I want to go live my life, the way that I want to go do it, and I'm going to pursue my own plan. And so these names as we move through here are really important. Now, just in case you're curious, the name Arthur, that means champion. Why are you laughing? No, actually it means doofus. But anyway, next verse, it says, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, who had decided he's going to go do his own thing because we get out of this famine, I'm going to find a way to provide for my family because I don't trust God to provide for me, died. And she was left with her two sons. So things are, this is kind of hard to read. And it says these two sons, they took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And so these Moabite sons, their sons married two Moabite women named Orpah and Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. And so this is not something that happened, just like this, but there's a significant period of time that has happened here. And it says, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman, and the writer here is calling an emphasis this just to remind you how destitute and poor she is getting ready to be, because she has nobody to take care of her. Because in the Mideast, when you lose your husband and you don't have any sons to take care of you, and remember, by this time she would be an older woman because her sons were old enough to be married. So she would be an older, and so she's left without her two sons and her husband, so she is in a mess. And it says, then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. So she decides, I'm going to go back to Bethlehem. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So word gets to her that, hey, listen, there's food there. I can't even survive here. It's just me and my two daughters-in-law, and I'm all alone. I'm a widow with no help. What am I going to do? I'll go back there because I hear they have food now there. So she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah, going back to Bethlehem. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. He said, look, she says, y'all should just go back home. I really got nothing for you. Thank you for being kind and supportive and loving, but the best thing for you is not to go back with me, because it's not going to go well for you if you come back with me. You should just go back to your mama's house. Maybe somebody there can take care of you. It says, the Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. So this is a really significant thing about we've been together and we've taken care of each other when things were not so good. We've been through crisis together. Sometimes those friendships that you've got that have been in crisis, there's this bond that forms in those relationships that is so tight. And so they've been in that kind of relationship, and they're saying, well, look, it's a mourning time. And so they're getting ready to tell each other goodbye. And they said to her, no, we're not going to leave you. We've stayed with you through all these things. Why would we leave you now? No, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? That makes no sense. Just think a minute. I mean, I know there's a lot of emotional connection here, but just hang on a minute. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husband? She says, look, I know that you kind of want to be around and maybe you like me a little bit, but even if I were to have more sons, there's no way you're going to wait around for the babies to be born and to grow up and to be men so that you can marry them. That makes no sense at all. Why would you want to be with me? You should just go. And she says, turn back, my daughters. Go your way. Go back. She says, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? And she says, no, don't do that. And she says, no, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me. See, because look at what she says. For it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Notice a couple things. She says the hand of the Lord has come out against her. She thinks that God is punishing her. So just to be real plain, God doesn't punish his children. He disciplines, but he doesn't punish. He's not trying to hurt, right? The other thing, she says, look, it's exceedingly bitter to me for you. She says, look, my heart hurts for you. I don't want you to endure more of this hardship and this difficulty. You don't need any more of this. That's not what I want for you. It breaks my heart that this is so hard for you. And it says, and then they lifted their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. And Orpah apparently goes back to Moab, settles in the far reaches of Moab in a town called Chicago. She starts a talk show, is wildly successful. And then she kind of gets full of herself and decides to start her own network. Everything crashes around her, and now she sells weight loss products in a foreign place. Not really. But Ruth clung to her. And this word clung that's here is the exact same word that's used in Genesis when God tells Adam and Eve that you should leave your family and cleave or cling to one another. So he's talking about a tight, unbreakable bond. And Ruth says, I'm with you. And it says, and she said, see, your sister-in-law's gone back. I mean, Orpah left. She started a talk show. She's gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. Right? And then right here, for a lot of people in the room, if you got married, you said, would you please read this at my wedding? And that's okay. And so maybe you've heard this at weddings. It says, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. And do you understand what she's saying? Is it not just I want to be with you, but what the Moabite gods that I have followed and things I've trusted in, I'm turning away from that. I'm forsaking everything that I know, everybody that's familiar to me, every support, every encouragement, all that I've got, I'm leaving all of that to go with you. And although I don't understand what your God does and how things work, because this is really weird to me, but I'm going to follow him. And she goes on, she says, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And maybe you had this read at your wedding. Maybe you've been to a wedding where somebody reads that, and I think it's beautiful that a husband and wife say, listen, that's who we want to be. Wherever you go, I will go. I think that's great. Here's what I've been at a lot of weddings. I've done a lot of weddings, and here's one thing I've never heard is a daughter saying this about her mother-in-law. Hey, will you read this over me and my mother-in-law? Because that's actually where it is. It's just kind of commitment between, or in-laws in general. Just like, hey, would you, wherever they go, because generally it's like, hey, wherever they go, we're going their direction. Is generally how that goes at weddings, right? It says, and when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said, okay, I'm not saying anything else. No more. So just to sum up real quickly, Naomi returns to the people she left. Remember, she's destitute. She's got nothing. She's a widow. She has no children. There's no men to help her. And she is going to go back to a bunch of people that she has left. And she has a Moabite daughter-in-law and it's coming in. And listen, people are going to be prejudiced against that. Listen, you have somebody who's with you? No. I don't think so much. What is she doing here? She's our enemy. Because there's no indication in Scripture that this was what Ruth did. And I don't think that she did this. But Moabite women had a reputation for seducing men. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred. What are they doing here? She left. Just a lot of chatter, a little gossip. Hey, did you see a lot of that going on? And it was stirred because of them. And the women said, is that Naomi? She left. Maybe she's gone 20 years by this point. It's been a long, long time. And she comes back, well, what is she doing here? And she said to them, do not call me Naomi. She says, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. And she says, you know what? God could have done so much more for me, and he didn't. Now, here's the thing. I think there's people today, and when I start talking about Naomi and circumstances and difficulty, you go, shh, that's a bad story, but it's nothing compared to mine. Because you've been disappointed. You signed up, you filled out the card, you did the deal, and you're like, hey, God, here I am. And life's not going the way that you think it should be going. And so you're disappointed, you're frustrated. You don't want to say it out loud, but honestly, you're a little mad at God. And you question if he knows what he's doing. And you never say that to anybody else. Maybe you wake up in the middle of the night and you think that, but And you think, you know what, maybe he's forgotten about me. Maybe he's abandoned me. Maybe if I would do something, he would love me more. Maybe if I could be a better person. She says, I'm bitter. Just call me. It's not much you call me bitter, because Naomi means pleasant. Lovely. She says, don't call me pleasant and lovely anymore. I want you to call me bitter. She says, I went away full. And look, and she says, and the Lord has brought me back empty. God didn't do anything for me. Everything was great. God didn't do anything for me. Why call me Naomi? When the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me. So Naomi returned. She's back in Bethlehem. And Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. So it's a hard chapter to read. And we're going to stop there. And we'll see what happens week to week, right? A couple of things here, though. 2 lands we're talking about. There's a land of promise, Bethlehem, the house of bread. There's a land of compromise, Moab. So there's 2 things going on. There's 2 hurt people, right? There's Naomi. Naomi is, she's bitter, she's angry, she's hurt. Things have not happened the way that she wanted them to happen. And she is so tired of being hurt. It's been a nightmare for at least 10 years. Maybe longer than that. She's lost everything. And let me ask you this. Do you ever feel like the providence of God has been hard on you? Do you ever feel like the weight of your circumstances have been especially heavy to bear? Because see, here's the thing. Maybe somebody told you when you start following Jesus that everything was going to be unicorns and rainbows. But what we find in the Bible is that over and over again, that God's people suffer at varying degrees. And so we're like, whew, thanks for telling me that. Can't wait to come back next week. Hey, bring the kids. It's going to be amazing. Yeah, hey, we get to suffer. Yeah. How about tell you what? How about I just stay home? How about I just take a nap? Waffle House is open on Sunday. Go do that. Sometimes we just feel like it's been one thing after another. So she's hurt. And Ruth, she's hurt too. She's got this really humble devotion. She's got a fairly new faith. She's surrendered everything that she has to God. And she doesn't understand, doesn't understand everything. Well, Naomi, this God that you follow, it's not like he's making everything just wonderful for you. Things are a little difficult for you sometimes, aren't they? What's going on with that? And as I was looking through this passage this week, what just kept coming back to my mind is what if God would raise up Ruth all over Southcrest? That we would have women who would say, you know what? I'm going to follow God no matter what. I'm going to be devoted to him no matter what. I'm committed to him no matter what. I'm trusting him no matter what. I believe that he will do what he says he'll do. What if God would raise up women like Ruth all over Southcrest? And here's the truth. I think that God has already started that. And here's the other thought I had. What if God would raise up men like that? What if we had men? What if we had students that said, I'm going to follow him. I'm going to trust him. I'm going to put my faith in him. Even when it doesn't make sense. Even when he's not doing what I want him to do, because, by the way, he's not your butler. What if we had men that said, I'm going to follow him no matter what? People that would forsake, men and women and students, that would forsake the things of this world to follow God. Men and women and students that would forsake everything and follow Jesus. There's two people. There's two needs. And we see this through the book of Ruth. They need food and they need family because they don't have either one of those things. And then you sit here and go, how can two widowed, childless women survive? And we're really going to see who God is as we study Ruth. But let me show you a couple of pictures of God real quickly. And this is in verse 20, going back. And, you noticed this when we read it a minute ago? She says, the Almighty, the Lord, the Almighty. So there's a couple of things going on there. There's two pictures of God. When it says the Almighty, that's the word Shaddai. It's a description of God. And so it's sometimes referred to as El Shaddai. It refers to his sovereignty, to his greatness, to there's nothing that he can't do. Maybe you used to sing that old Amy Grant song, El Shaddai. If you sang that song, I'm sorry. Who's Amy Grant? I think I married to Vince Gill. Yeah, that's him. Okay. And the other word that's used there, when it says the Lord, is God's name, Yahweh. So anytime you see the Lord, all in capital letters in your Bible, it's the word Yahweh. It's God's name. When Moses was at the burning bush and he said, hey, who are you? And God said, I am. And he said, said his name, and everything changed for him. When Jesus was about to be arrested and 1,000 Roman soldiers come to arrest him and said, who are you? And he says, I am. He says the same thing that Moses heard at the burning bush. And 1,000 Roman soldiers back up a step and fall over backwards because of the power of the name of God. And so there's two pictures there, and you sit there and go, but look, Arthur, can God be great and good? Because maybe he's great and maybe he's powerful and maybe do everything. Let me tell you something, he's not being so good to me. Because see, what we think sometimes is we go, but things are not going so good for me. Maybe he's great, but because we start saying these things like, well, does God really know what he's doing? Did that surprise God? Because something happened in your life, you're like, well, God should have stopped that. He knew better, didn't he? Why didn't he stop it? Why didn't he do something about that? Why did he just, kind of let that happen? Why is he letting things in my family disintegrate? And so those kind of questions sort of pop up, and we wonder, look, is he really good? Is he really doing the best he can? Something happens, and you get the diagnosis from the doctor, and you're like, that's not so good. And or you get the divorce papers in the mail from the attorney, and you go, or your child just not responding anymore. And you're like, what in the world's going on? No, God, these two things are inseparable. But because God is so good, He's great. And here's the thing: is that there's one promise for us in this passage today that's so key for us to understand this relationship between God's goodness and His greatness. And that's because He is sovereign. God ordains, and maybe you don't like that big church word, so we'll put the word uses there if you like that one better. Because He's sovereign, God uses sorrowful tragedy to set the stage for surprising triumph. That's what God does. He is setting the stage when things are difficult in your life. He is setting the stage to reveal His faithfulness to you. He is putting the foundation in place so that, look, you're going to look back and go, oh, the hand of God was working in my life. And when you are in the middle of that, it feels like torture and it's awful, and you feel like you're being twisted apart, and it hurts, and you can't sleep, and you wonder what in the world is going on. It's because He is putting a foundation in place so that you can know His faithfulness to you. And so it says Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. And we're going to see that, oh, look, God is getting ready to do something here. And it starts unfolding, and we'll talk about that next week. But this idea of famine, listen, you find it all through the Bible, and struggle and difficulty. I mean, Abraham and Isaac had to deal with famine. The children of Israel were in bondage for forever, difficult circumstances. Daniel is taken from his home, and he's taken to Babylon, and he's made a captive, and he goes through one difficult thing after another. He's thrown in a den of lions. I mean, nobody has to deal with something like that around here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're in this furnace, and they're like, what's going to happen to us? And God does something remarkable in them, because what happens is when things are difficult for us, we think that God is far from us. And when we're surrounded by famine, and maybe not literal famine, maybe it's spiritual famine, difficult things in our lives, and we go, God, where are you? You seem so far away, when it seems as though that everything seems foreign to us, and nothing is making sense, and we can't get the connections, and we can't get to where we need to be, or when death strikes, because it comes suddenly. And go, I wasn't expecting that, and it's hard. Like, God, but I loved her so much. Why couldn't I have more time with her? And when despair sinks in, and you're like, I'm not going to be able to get out of the ditch. I am just trapped, and we're lonely. And we go, God, where are you? I've got nobody there. God, you always say you're always here. Where are you so much? And you seem like you're in a barren land, and everything is not happening for you, and things are just falling apart, or you're stuck in grief. And grief is this, you don't get over grief in 2 days. It takes time. You're like, God, would you help me? Or when we're trapped in shame, and we go, this is so difficult. But what will happen is God will show Himself faithful to us. That's what He'll do, because look what this is. This is the gospel. That's what this is. This is the beauty of being bought back, of redemption, of being back in a relationship with Jesus, because every single one of us in this room, if you are a Christ follower, you are Elimelech. You have said, God is my king, and I'll follow you and walk with you and be with you. But you have turned your back on Him and said, I'm not going to go choose my plan. I'm going over here. This is better. Look, God, over here, things aren't going the way I want them to right now, so I'm going to go over here. And even though you say God is my king, we do our own thing. And God, no matter how many times you do that, whether you've done that 3 times or 3 million times, He says, I love you anyway. And there's nothing you can do to make me love you more. He says, I love you. And if you don't have a relationship with God through His Son Jesus, you're Ruth. You're outcast. You're difficult, hard, unusual. But God says, I love you. And He says, I want you. And for every single one of us in here that is a Christ follower, we were at one point in our life, we were Ruth. God's holy, we're not. And he said, I want to reconcile that relationship. I want to be with you. And he said, I love you. No matter what you've done, no matter where you were, no matter what happened, the conversation, I don't care what you did Thursday night, he says, I love you. And so God shows himself faithful to us. And so his grace is going to cover our sin. And if you don't hear anything else I've said today, would you please write this down? Get your phone out. Take a picture of it right here. Number 2, sin from your past does not dispel hope for your future. None of it. I don't care what you did, how heinous it was, how terrible it was. Your past does not dispel hope for your future. And his mercy will overcome our sorrow. So I've never done this. I'm just going to read a couple verses. I've got 6 verses. I'm going to read a couple verses. There's this old hymn a guy named William Cowper wrote, and I want you I've got to hurry. But he was in an insane asylum because of his depression. And he felt like that everything in his life had fallen apart. And so he wrote this poem. And he found a Bible and he started reading it and he realized that God was going to take his tragedy and turn it into a triumph. That he was laying the foundation so that he could do a work of faithfulness in his life. Because Naomi is sitting there and she's like, what in the world is going on? And she's at her end. She comes back, she finds rejection from everybody and standing right beside her is the fullness of God in a Moabite woman. And God is going to use a Moabite woman to bring about a promise of faithfulness in Naomi's life. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait to show you the rest. It says God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. Deep in unfathomable minds of never-failing skill, he treasures up his bright designs and works his sovereign will. It says, ye fearful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds you so much dread are big with mercy and shall break in blessings on your head. Judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust him for his grace. Behind a frowning providence, he hides a smiling face. His purposes will ripen fast, unfolding every hour. The bud may have a bitter taste, but sweet will be the flower. And blind belief is sure to err and scan his work in vain. God is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain. Let me tell you, he hadn't forgotten you. He hadn't walked away from you. He hadn't turned his back on you. He is taking care of you. He looks at you and he loves you and wants to draw you close to him. And he says, just walk with me. Just walk with me. See what I'll do. Because what feels like tragedy today is going to be triumph. But let me tell you something. God will show you who he is. And he is bigger and stronger and kinder and more loving than you can imagine. And there waits for you something better than you can imagine.